I never thought a simple train ride could change the way I see the world. That afternoon, the city was a blur of gray skies and tired faces, everyone buried in their own thoughts or glued to their phones. I was no different, just me, a worn backpack, and a ticket to somewhere I wasn't even sure I wanted to be. But then he appeared. I noticed him across the aisle first because he seemed out of place. Not in the way people usually notice someone, like flashy clothes or loud laughter, but in a quieter, unsettling way. He had an intensity in his eyes, the kind that makes you feel like he's staring straight through you without even trying. He was older, maybe in his late 40s, with a weathered face that spoke of 1,000 untold stories. His hands rested on a small notebook, fingers tapping absent-mindedly, like he was rehearsing words he didn't yet dare to speak. At first, I tried to ignore him. I always do, especially on trains where personal space is sacred and silence is gold. But then he leaned just slightly forward and, in a voice that was calm but carried a strange weight, he asked me a question. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you answered honestly to someone you barely know? The words hit me like an unexpected jolt of electricity. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard correctly. Did he just mean me? My heart started beating faster, not because I was scared, exactly, but because suddenly the humdrum world around me seemed sharper, and somehow heavier. I didn't know what to say. Normally, I'd smile politely and nod, or maybe pretend I didn't hear him at all. But there was something in his gaze, something quietly demanding, that made me pause. My curiosity tangled with a flicker of unease. There was something about the way he phrased it, as if he wasn't just asking a question, but offering a choice. A choice I didn't even realize I had. I glanced at him again, hoping he'd look away, hoping this wasn't a trap. But he didn't. And for the first time that day, I noticed the faint trembling of his hands, almost imperceptible, like he was holding onto a secret he wasn't ready to share. I wanted to look out the window, to focus on the passing city, but my eyes kept drifting back. The train rattled along the tracks, passengers dozing or scrolling, oblivious, and I felt like I was suddenly in a different world, a world where one simple question could unravel days, maybe even years, of carefully guarded thoughts. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just a lonely man with an odd habit of asking strangers strange questions. That would make sense, right? But something in the pit of my stomach told me otherwise. Something told me that this question wasn't random, and that the answer, well, the answer might change everything. I swallowed hard, feeling a strange mix of fear and anticipation. And then he leaned just a little closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, almost conspiratorial, and said words that I would remember for days. I couldn't stop thinking about that question for the rest of the train ride. Who was this man, really? And why had his words struck a chord I didn't even know existed? My name is Emma, and usually, my life is the kind of ordinary nobody notices. Office job, small apartment, weekends filled with errands, or a quiet coffee with my best friend, Lily. Life had a rhythm, predictable and safe, and I liked it that way. Until that train ride. Lily has been my anchor for years. She's the kind of friend who knows when I'm lying to myself, who can make me laugh even on my worst days. We've shared everything. Our fears, our failures, our tiny victories. But even she didn't know the thoughts I kept tucked in the back of my mind, the questions I never dared to ask anyone. Because what if the answer scared me? Or worse, made me feel trapped? That day, I was on my way to a routine meeting, carrying the weight of a week filled with deadlines and quiet frustrations. I felt invisible in a world that moved fast and demanded performance. And then there was him, the stranger. Somehow, his question hit a part of me I hadn't acknowledged in years, the part that wondered if I was just drifting through life, answering to expectations, not to myself. I kept replaying his words, over and over, in my head. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you answered honestly to someone you barely know? The phrasing felt deliberate, as if he had studied it, shaped it to pierce through the small shields I kept around my life. I tried to dismiss it as nothing, but I couldn't. I didn't even catch his name. He didn't introduce himself, and I didn't ask. Something about the way he moved, how he carried himself, told me he wasn't just a random stranger. Maybe he had a story, or maybe he wanted to tell mine, without me realizing it yet. By the time I got off the train, the city lights were flickering in the early evening, shadows stretching across the pavement. I felt uneasy, like I had stepped out of my normal life and into something slightly off. My apartment, usually a place of comfort, felt smaller, quieter, almost like it was waiting for me to decide something I didn't yet understand. Even Lily noticed. When I told her about the encounter later, she laughed nervously. "Emma, it's just a man on the train. People say weird things all the time." But I couldn't laugh. Not really. Because the moment I met his gaze, something shifted. It wasn't just curiosity. It was recognition, like a door had been opened inside me that I didn't know was locked. And now, every little thing felt different. The way people smiled at me on the street. The way the train rattled along its tracks. Even my own reflection in the mirror seemed uncertain. There was a question lingering, one I hadn't asked myself out loud yet. One I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. I didn't know it then, but that single encounter was about to start a chain of events that would force me to confront truths I'd spent my whole life avoiding. And with each passing day, the stranger's question echoed louder, haunting me, pressing me towards something I couldn't yet see. For days after the train ride, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed inside me. His question wasn't just a random spark. It was a needle, poking at thoughts I had carefully tucked away. I kept replaying it, turning it over in my mind. What would happen if I answered honestly to someone I barely know? I tried to push it aside, threw myself into work, texted Lily constantly, even binge-watched old shows, but nothing worked. Every time I sat quietly, waiting for the hum of the city to fade, I felt it again, the weight of that gaze, that calm, unsettling insistence. Then, something strange started happening. I began noticing details I'd usually ignore. A man who lingered a little too long at the crosswalk, a voice murmuring just behind me in the subway, the faint scuff of footsteps on the stairs when I was sure I was alone. It felt impossible, paranoid even, but the sensation wouldn't leave me. And in the center of it all, his question played on repeat, a whisper echoing in my skull. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had imagined him. Maybe I was reading too much into a random encounter. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Something about him had burrowed under my skin, like a puzzle I was desperate to solve, but wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. Then, one evening, I got a note slipped under my apartment door. No name, no explanation, just a single line. "You've been thinking about me. Now it's time to answer." My hands shook as I held it, heart hammering, mind racing. Who was watching me? How did he know I was thinking about him? And what exactly did he mean by answer? I wanted to ignore it, to throw it away, and pretend nothing had happened. But curiosity, and maybe a touch of fear, won. I felt drawn into a game I didn't understand, caught between the safety of my predictable life and the unknown lurking just beyond it. I looked out the window that night, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and gray, and wondered how far this could go. And then I realized, I wasn't sure I wanted to find out, but somehow, I already had. The next few days felt like walking through a fog that grew thicker with every step. I couldn't tell if it was paranoia or something else entirely, but one thing was certain. My life had quietly shifted into a new, unsettling rhythm. Every sound, every shadow, seemed to carry a meaning I couldn't quite grasp. The stranger's question had planted itself in my mind, but now the note under my door made it impossible to ignore. I started noticing patterns. Faces in the subway that seemed familiar, fleeting glimpses of him in cafes, on buses, always just at the edge of my vision. It was impossible. How could one man be everywhere, and yet never approach me? Yet somehow I felt him. His presence was like a pressure in the air, heavy and impossible to dismiss. I tried to tell Lily, but how could I explain it without sounding insane? "Someone's watching me," I said one night, pacing my tiny apartment. Or maybe it's more than that. I think he knows things I haven't even said out loud. Lily didn't say much at first. She just studied me with that quiet concern only she had. "Emma, maybe you just need to breathe. Step back. Take a break." But I couldn't. Every attempt at normalcy felt like a lie. And the truth, the thing I couldn't stop thinking about, was that I wanted to find him. Not in the way of danger exactly, but in the way of needing answers, needing to confront whatever this was before it consumed me entirely. Then, one night, it happened. My phone buzzed with a message I didn't recognize. "Meet me where the city ends, where the trains stop." No name, no number, just those words. My pulse skyrocketed. My instincts screamed to ignore it, but my curiosity, that same gnawing need that had driven me this far, would not let me. I tried to prepare myself. I told myself it could be anyone. A prank. A coincidence. A trap. But even as I walked toward the old train terminal, a cold wind creeping through the streets, I felt an unshakable certainty that this was him. Every step was a battle between fear and a magnetic pull I couldn't explain. The shadows of the terminal stretched long and threatening, the silence of the empty platforms wrapping around me like a warning. And then I saw movement. A figure standing near the tracks, just beyond the flickering lights. Familiar. Unsettling. Waiting. My stomach dropped. I wanted to turn and run, but my feet didn't obey. Something told me that if I walked away now, I'd regret it forever. And yet, I didn't know what I would find if I kept going. Because the stranger was not just a man on a train anymore. And what he wanted from me, I wasn't ready to face. I froze as the figure stepped closer, and then, impossibly, he smiled. But it wasn't the same man from the train. Or maybe it was. His face looked the same, but there was something darker now, a cold calculation in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Emma," he said, voice low and calm. "You've been thinking about honesty, but honesty isn't what I want from you." I stumbled back, heart hammering. What do you mean?" He reached into his coat and pulled out my own notebook, the one I carried everywhere, full of my private thoughts, my fears, my deepest secrets. "Everything you've written, everything you've hidden. I've been reading. And now, you have a choice. Share it willingly, or let the city learn it first." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a stranger with a question anymore. This was someone who had crossed every boundary, invaded every corner of my life. And now, the stakes weren't just curiosity or fear. They were personal, terrifying, inescapable. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But deep down, I knew I couldn't. Not yet. Because the next move would decide everything. I could feel my knees weakening as he held my notebook in one hand, the streetlights casting long, jagged shadows across his face. My thoughts spun, a storm of fear, anger, and disbelief. How could anyone know my secrets? My private fears, my unspoken thoughts, all of it, exposed in his hands. I won't let you," I said, my voice shaking. "This is mine. You have no right." He smiled again, but it was different this time, smarter, almost amused. "Right or wrong doesn't matter," he said. "It's about honesty. And you've been hiding for too long." I realized in that moment that the choice wasn't about him or the notebook. It was about me. Every hesitation, every lie I told myself to stay safe, had led to this. And the only way forward was to face it head on. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every day I'd ignored my own voice. "Fine," I said. "I'll answer honestly." The world seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, deliberately, I opened the notebook and read aloud one truth I had never shared with anyone. The fear I'd buried so deep it almost didn't feel real. The stranger's eyes didn't soften. Instead, something shifted. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and handed the notebook back. "You faced it," he said simply. "And that changes everything." Before I could ask what he meant, a hand touched my shoulder. I spun around and froze. Behind me stood Lily, pale and trembling, holding her own notebook, the one she'd shown me in confidence years ago. "Emma, he did the same with me," she whispered. "He knows everything, and he's been testing us." I realized then that the stranger's question wasn't just random. It wasn't just about me. It was a challenge, a game designed to expose truth, not just from me, but from everyone he touched. And in that instant, I understood. The train ride, the notes, the fear, it had only just begun. The morning after, the city felt quieter somehow, as if it had been holding its breath along with me. Lily and I sat in her small kitchen, the sunlight spilling over the table, illuminating the stacks of notebooks we now held like fragile, sacred objects. Neither of us spoke at first. We didn't need to. The shared weight of what had happened hung between us, a silent understanding of something larger than ourselves. I looked down at my notebook and traced the edges with my fingers. Every fear, every secret I had tried to bury, it was all there. And yet, somehow, facing it aloud, letting someone, even a stranger, see it, had lifted a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying for years. I felt lighter, clearer, alive in a way I hadn't known I could feel. Lily finally broke the silence. I don't know who he is, she said quietly. But maybe that's the point. Maybe he's not meant to be understood, just experienced. He's a reminder that the truths we hide are heavier than the truths we share. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words sink in. The stranger's intrusion, terrifying as it had been, had forced me to confront myself in a way no one else could. I realized the notebooks, the questions, the fear, they weren't about punishment or control. They were about awakening, about honesty, about finally facing life without hiding. And yet, even as we laughed softly at the absurdity of it all, a shiver ran down my spine. Somewhere in the city, the stranger was still out there, moving silently, watching, waiting. Maybe for someone else, maybe for another truth to unfold. I didn't know, and somehow, I didn't want to. I glanced at Lily, and we both smiled, the tension finally easing. We had survived it. We had confronted it. And for the first time in a long while, we felt like ourselves again. Not perfect, not unafraid, but honest. Brave enough to say what we felt, brave enough to meet the world with eyes open. That night, as I walked home through the quiet streets, I carried a strange mixture of fear and gratitude. The stranger's question, the one that had haunted me for days, echoed in my mind, but no longer like a threat. It was a challenge I had met and a lesson I had learned. The courage to be seen, even by someone unknown, is sometimes the only way to truly see yourself. I smiled to myself, feeling a calm I hadn't felt in years. The city moved on, oblivious, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never look at a stranger, or a question, the same way again. Some encounters leave no trace. Others leave you changed forever. And this one changed me. And maybe, somewhere out there, he was smiling too, knowing the game was never really about him. It was always about us.